are so selfish. You're so selfish. You're so spoiled. You are... How many of you have heard that from a parent or a partner or someone in your life? Now, maybe you are selfish. Maybe. But the kind of accusation of you're so selfish and how that can be told to us as children. You're selfish because you took an extra cookie. You're selfish for wanting your door closed, or you're selfish for wanting boundaries or saying no to a parent. I'm talking about the kind of selfish that you're often told that you are through emotionally unsafe, immature, whatever types of parents or partners. And oftentimes you don't believe it up here, but deep inside you've been told this message, or maybe you do believe it because your whole life, or a large part of it, you were told that. So we're going to talk about what does it look like if you are selfish. My guess is many of you are not selfish, you are selfless. If you come from a complex trauma childhood, CPTSD childhood, a relational trauma that you've had, often at the hands of what should have been safe teachers, parents, coaches, mentors, others. There's a part of you that wonders, is it selfish to have my own needs? Because your life was really built so often around making it about everyone else. So whenever you do something for yourself, that early message inside, you're so selfish, gets triggered. But maybe for you, selfish is you feeding yourself a healthy, nutritious meal or a treat meal, something that's special. Maybe it is taking a nap that feels like impossible. Maybe it is for once, saying, no, that doesn't work for me. Setting a boundary. So let's go through it. There is a difference between selfishness and self-centeredness and being self-focused. The true form of selfishness is really about the person having their own needs be the only needs or desires or wants in place. We can be self-focused at times. We can be self-centered. Self-centered can have these elements of focusing too much on ourselves, not necessarily with the intent to deprive others, but we're going to talk about it at the core in this sort of terminology today around being told you're so selfish, okay? So the first thing is people who are selfish have no regard for how their behavior impacts others. They really don't care. Is that you? Probably not, but let me know at the end of this. Consistently, people who are selfish act in their own best interest. They don't take into account how other people might feel or think or what credit for something or what might benefit them. It's really about how they move forward and them alone. They often have no empathy and no remorse for those who are suffering. So they don't really care if your feelings get hurt. They don't care if they take something from you. They don't care. And I know there's a spectrum of this from like highly clinical, kind of like psychopathic end to the end where maybe you had just a lot of trauma and you're more like self-centered at times because you had to only take care of yourself, to their like truly selfishness, intensively selfish, self-focused behavior. That is about what I'm saying. But, this is what I'm saying is I'm reading all these to you because my guess is you're not these things, but you were called these things. And at times you think this is the same thing. You self-advocating, you having your own needs or boundaries is the same thing as you being selfish. I always have cat hairs or my own hair flying around. But that's not the same thing. People who are selfish often ask for favors but don't offer the same thing in return. They often are unkind, or if they are kind, there's a motivation, right? There's some gain for them. They use others to get what they want. So people are like chess moves. They are revengeful and will get back at you if they perceive that you have violated something against them as a self. And so they will selfishly try to hurt you at all costs. They often will feel entitled and be manipulative. So it's always about getting what they want. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'd be surprised, especially if you subscribe to this channel, if any of those things are truly true about you. Of course, we all have things we do sometimes that they're not the nicest things. That's okay, we're human. We don't mean to be selfish or hurt people. I just had a memory and I just want to share this. I've shared that my father left this planet at his own accord when I was 23. And I had not spoken to his siblings for many years. And when I had my first son, I flew down to visit one of them. And they so generously, I think at that point, I don't think they had any grandchildren yet. They had a lot of kids, but no, maybe just one, maybe one child, maybe one. They bought, sort of some cute little, little inexpensive, but still, I'm sure they cost money, toys from like Target, or Toys R Us. There was like a few rattles and a few little things in the crib. And it was the first time since my father's loss. It was probably so my father passed when I was 23 and I had my first child when I was 29. So I might have been 30. It might have been 7 years since I had been since the funeral around them, because I had been living in a different state. And when I went to leave their house, there was some conversation of like, oh, why don't you take a toy or two? And I took a couple extra. And I have always been so afraid of like asking for what I want. But the reason why I did that is because they were the only things I had that reminded me of my father. But I knew afterwards, like, it was going to be perceived that I was just taking things for myself. Like, I don't know why I felt that way. I just, given that situation and that time, I feel like that's what happened. So that's an example of like, I was taking something more. It wasn't like I couldn't afford it or they couldn't afford it. It wasn't about that at all. And maybe they didn't feel this way, but in my mind, I felt so bad. I hadn't thought of this memory in so long. And it would have been perceived as selfish. And in some ways, I guess it was, right? I should have thought more about asking, or I don't know. I just felt like I had to have these things as a reminder of my father, because we had been estranged for the 5 years before he left. But we had spoken 2 times. He'd reached out in the few months before the end. Like, of course, I didn't realize that. And I also did lose him on basically Father's Day weekend. And so that's always a great memory for me, which is probably why I don't make enough dad content, but I will. I'm working my way there, because that's obviously a lot too. But the point is that we do things sometimes, and we're not trying to be like selfish. You know what I mean? Holes. We're not trying to be selfish jerks. But sometimes we do things because we have other reasons. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, to not just presume people are being selfish, because we are all, in a certain sense, all of us we should all be somewhat self-focused. We have to be self-focused to survive. But when the label has been pinned on you, and I just got triggered there because probably I've talked about, we have this thread of like, I'm the bad child, there's something wrong with me for wanting more. So I think it's really important when you start to do this to yourself that you ask yourself, is this need I have, first of all, does it feel good to me? Does it feel justified to me? Am I trying to hurt someone else? Will it hurt someone else? Would I judge other people for doing that? Usually the answer is no. And then lastly, understanding that when you start to let yourself lean into your own heart and your own self, when you've had a complex childhood trauma situation, it feels like a violation to even consider yourself, because so much of the messages we received, even if a parent never actually said those words to you, the core wound, I believe, of childhood, CPTSD especially, is often about our own worthiness and lovability and our core belief around, being good children or things not being our fault. And so I really want you, maybe you don't have this one with selfish, but you insert another word. You are so, but it is not your voice. And that's the last thing I'll say is, when you say that to yourself, whose voice is it? Whose voice have you internalized to be the voice of your own when it is not your own? And I would challenge you that you are probably being too selfless. So many of us who struggle with these issues struggle with self-care. And I literally just had therapy with the same conversation with my therapist. Like, it has been a struggle. I'm so good at taking care of everyone else, and my own health has suffered, things have suffered, and I'm getting better at it. That's what I was telling her today. But it's true, even things just like walking every day, exercising, or trying to eat, trying to deal with my autoimmune in a way that I know certain foods make me feel not as good. or trying to give myself grace. For me, it's like feeling guilty about, like, it's selfish for me to just sit down and rest, right, during the day. I'm supposed to just go, 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 go. That's been an old narrative. But my autoimmune forces me to sit down and rest more than I'd like to admit. But the bottom line is that these messages, and I'm going to do some more, I think You're So Spoiled is another one. And many parents who called their kids spoiled were kids who they just basically provided for them as parents are supposed to do. Maybe they had more here or there. But these messages land in our brain and they can really be turned against. We can turn them against ourselves. And so that's what I wanted to share today, is that it's a very good chance you are not selfish. You are probably selfless and doing too much for others. And frankly, not being selfish in your own thinking enough, your own self-focusing on yourself. Understanding that you are worthy of boundaries and love and health and connection and support. So that's it for today. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.